So from this point you'll hear the detune come in gradually. Hi guys, I'm SKETI, welcome to this tutorial. This time I've got something awesome to show you, and that's how to make some plucks in Serum that can evolve over time, that you can stick in your house tunes, breaks tunes, or whatever it is you're making. But that sort of dead mousey sound, but a little bit further, with some sort of tropical house influence in there as well. Anyway, let's get to it. Right, so I've got a Serum open here, which is with initialized patch. I'm just going to play this back to start with. It will sound horrible, but I've made some chords on this MIDI region here. If we just shut this one down, so there we go. Got some chords and I'll play that back now. So at the moment they sound absolutely terrible. Well, not terrible, but not what I'm wanting to achieve right now to make these sort of chord pluck kind of sounds that we hear in progressive house, tropical house, and so on and so forth. So first thing I'm going to do is with this oscillator, first of all turn the random start point down so it always starts from the middle point. And I'm going to go into the wavetable designer, and up here we can make different waveforms. If we put it all the way up, we make a sine wave, and then if we add every other harmonic, we can start getting into square wave territory. But for now we're just going to focus on a sine wave, but that's not fully extended to the top of the amplitude range, but sort of just above halfway. So if we play that by itself, just a simple sine wave. Now we can shut that down because we're only going to use that wave as it is, and with some warp using sync and half window, and that's going to start from this point. Now again, as I do in these tutorials, I was experimenting around making this earlier on, so I already know where I'm sort of starting from to get this made. But again, these are just tips to start with. You don't have to use these waveforms, because the main things that a pluck is controlled by is envelopes, and then filters that are controlled by LFOs and envelopes as well. So actually we're going to move on to that straight away, and we're going to turn the filter on, and most often, like the stereotypical, if I just start using the 265, if I start using this first envelope to control the cutoff of the filter, we straight away we get that pluck sound. But that's been used to death now, so instead of just using a low pass filter, I'm going to use this phase 24 minus. Now I'm not entirely sure how this works, the filtering behind it. Obviously it's got a notch here and then a wider notch at the end, but it's more to do with the phasing of how this filter works. I haven't looked into this fully, so I wouldn't be able to explain it in any great detail, but what I've found is just with a little bit more resonance as well, and just check that all my settings are correct from what I made earlier. Yeah, if we listen to it now, it has a nice little sweep in the bottom range. If we listen to it, if it was just a normal low pass filter, it keeps a little bit more of the top end in as well, so it just gives us a little bit more of a different sound than we normally get with a low pass filter. Next thing I'm going to add is a sub oscillator, and that's just sticking on the sine wave, and again this is going to be controlled by either the LFO or the envelope when I get to it, and bring this down an octave as well. And a good thing to do is if you want to sort of widen the range of how many notes are played and how big this chord sounds, is it's basically experimenting with different octaves. So if this one's at -1, turn this one up +1. We've now got a wider extended range of how many notes are played in that chord. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up the unison to 5 and control the blend and the detune as well. So detune is going to turn all the way down because these are going to be controlled by macros later on. Basically just if you hear these kind of plucks used in progressive house and tropical house and so on, you hear that there's a lot of modulation happens over time with automation, with the cutoff being raised and detuning happening and so on and so forth. So this is just setting up the synth for when we get into the macros later on. Next I'm going to use oscillator B as well. Again, turn the random completely off. Just remember that needs to be fully up, and that, yeah, about there. So just making sure these levels are set to how they were. Again, I've tested this before, so I know what this is going to sound like. But obviously when you're making this yourself, experiment with the different levels, so on and so forth. Next thing I'm going to do, which I found, I quite like this subby saw. And I'm actually going to add, with a little bit more experimentation, so I'm going to add in actually this envelope to control that as well. So this is what this sounds like now. Bring this down an octave. Cool. The next modulation I'm going to add is an LFO, and if I just check the old one that I did, yeah, so that was on the sub oscillator, and then yeah, another one in the effects that we haven't got to yet. So this is basically going to be triggered with an envelope. So every time the note starts again, it starts from this point. So it doesn't start anywhere else in the envelope timing, which obviously this is another LFO, but I'm using it as an envelope. It just gives me more control of how I can shape this envelope if I use this envelope instead. I'm just going to bring this just by drawing a point in. Come on. Sometimes I'm finding my mouse at the moment is double clicking when I don't want it to. I think I need a new mouse. So there we go. And then I'm going to attach this to this sub oscillator here. And if I just check it, it pretty much goes the extended way. Now the next thing I'm going to do before I go into the effects section is I'm just going to basically put two of the macros in already. So the first one is going to control how much sync is happening. So the synchronization over a half window, as you can see, it's sort of like a detuning but adding extra octaves in. So if you can imagine, that's 1 octave, that's 2 octaves, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm going to just start from that point. Let me just go back to where it was. There we go. And I'm just going to basically drag this in there, and that's just going above, just above halfway. So now when I'll just rename that. Now when I play it back, I can start evolving that sound with the sync. Now it'll sound very subtle for now, but as we start to add extra things in, that'll become more apparent as this gets increased. Next thing I'm going to do is control the envelope opening time with this macro, and I'm going to add it to here. And I found, yeah, about that length. So if I do env open, like so, just check if there's anything else being controlled, which there isn't. So yeah, as I play this back now and open the envelope, you'll hear what starts to happen. So this is something that can be used to automate over time, which is a great thing to do in this type of music anyway. Now, next thing is onto the effects. First of all, compressor, just to make sure that it's not clipping, but this time I'm not going to let it go red like I would an old bass sound that I've shown in previous tutorials. This is just to bring it its level up, but not to have it distorting either, so I'm not crushing it to death. Like so. And if we just look in the effects section on the next one, yeah, so the next thing I'm going to add is a hyperdimension, and this is going to re-trigger every single time the note plays. And I'm just going to have a bit of a shallow mix as well, not too much. That's just to add a little bit more stereo width. And I'm going to turn the size all the way down and then bring that. So imagine this like a very, very short reverb. But again, this adds a lot of width as well. So obviously post-processing afterwards, we could add an EQ8 in mid-side setting, so we can bring all the side out of the bottom end. Next thing I'm going to add is a reverb, just so we can get this sorted out. And if I just check, yeah, envelope open, that's attached to the reverb too. I'm going to keep it as a plate, turn the pre-delay all the way down, bring the low cut up so it's not adding any reverb in the low end. Width all the way up, and yeah, I've left this other settings pretty much the same. And then I'm going to control the mix with the envelope open dial, which if we listen to it now. The next thing I'm going to include is a filter. And this is going back to the sort of standard low pass filter but this is just to add in an extra layer of control with the envelope. And yeah, it pretty much starts from there. Now this is being controlled by two things, both this LFO one here and the envelope open dial. So I'm just going to attach that LFO to this cutoff, and this basically extends to the full range. Resonance, drive, fat, everything else is kept the same. So this is just for some extra control on the envelope. Fantastic. Next thing I'm going to add is a chorus, and this was just to add a little bit extra difference in the sound. And if I just listen to it, yeah, pretty much how I had before. This wasn't really doing any. Not that it wasn't doing anything. I hadn't changed any of the settings previously. It was just all I'd turned down was the mix. This was just to add an extra bit of modulation into the sound itself. So it's hardly noticeable at all, but it's just to add a little bit more characteristic within the sound. And the next thing is an EQ, and this is just to roll off a little bit of the bottom end. Turn the Q down on that so I don't have a big massive peak in that range. And yeah, frequency is pretty much set the same as well. And then I had a peak in the top end around about 4 kilohertz with a wide Q, just to give it some extra level in the top end. And the Q is quite wide on this one. Cool. So that's there really just to tighten the sound up a little bit. Nothing massive, just to give it a little bit tighten up in the bottom end and raise in the top end as well. And then the last thing in effects wise is the delay that I added, and this is just to add a cool extra bit of modulation that can be brought in with a macro at a later date. It doesn't have to be in all of the time, but just something else. And this is set to every 8th note as well. And did I set it to ping pong or anything like that? Yeah, I did set it to ping pong. And that basically means it bounces between your left and the right ear instead of happening in mono. It's sort of happening in stereo. Yeah, that's how it's happening in stereo. And then the delay mix is being controlled by this macro here. Fantastic. And then the last thing that I've added in is back to the detune. I'm just going to turn this. Add this macro to there and just name that detune. As always, it's good to label these macros so you know exactly what you're doing, instead of being macro 1, 2, 3 and 4. And if you've been working on this for a while, or you come back to it at a later date, you can't remember what any of the controls do. So now that's pretty much set up, we can listen back to it. And that was me just experimenting around with the different macros that I've included there. Now the next thing that we can do is, obviously it's good to listen to it against some other music, and I've got a bass line here which just follows the fundamental of each chord, and then some drums to go along with it. And the next thing to do is include this. If we can listen back to it first, but I'm going to start to control some of the macros with some automation. Fantastic. So yeah, I'm just going to go back into this Serum, and what I've found best thing in Ableton Live is if you want to control something specifically, is you just click on the dial it is you want to control. So first thing, click on the envelope open. Now unfortunately it names it as macro 2, so that's why it's important to name these things within Serum. There we go. So I'm just going to add in a point there, and then a point there. Just delete those sometimes. Because of this double click thing that's happening with my mouse, it creates extra points I don't want it to have in. There we go. It can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. Now we can listen to this back. So in the first half, it's going to pretty much stay at the original envelope setting and then increase with that as the macro opens up. And also, as a last one, I'm just going to increase that detune as well, so bring that all the way down. Yeah, so on macro 4, like so. If you hold option, okay, why isn't that working down? Hold option down. It should allow me to just move the point very fine. There we go. It's doing it. So from this point, you'll hear the detune come in gradually. So yeah, that's a great thing to do. Now, one thing I'm noticing, obviously, is because with me running on a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which isn't very powerful, as soon as I press play on this, you'll notice the CPU usage shoots right up. Now, this is something just to be wary of, and what it comes down to is how many sounds are played in unison at once. So if I set this back down to 1, it means I've got 1, 2, 3. But then in the effects section, because of unison, I've got 7 sounds playing at once. But then with that brought up to 5 as well, even though this is detuned all the way down to 0, so there's no detune happening to start with, it still means that 5 plus that 1, 5, 6, 7, and then with the unison in this, another 4, that's 11 sounds playing at once. So that's 11 different waveforms playing at the same time from one synth. So that's why it's causing a lot of CPU usage right now. So that's something just to be wary of, obviously, if you're producing on a computer that's not super powerful, but hopefully in the future I can upgrade and get something more powerful so I can start showing more complex tutorials as well. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Any questions about what I've done, please leave a comment below. Please like, subscribe and share. Hit the notification bell as well so you keep seeing these videos pop up in your recommendations as well. Anyway guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hi guys, SKETI here. Do you want to learn how to... Or how about, or maybe even, well, I'm now giving online one-to-one tuition. The lessons will be entirely centered around what you want to learn. We can cover such things as making drums, bass,
sound design, sidechaining, mixing, composition, music theory, mastering,
and much, much more. Maybe you just want to brush up on your production skills using Ableton Live or Logic, or whatever it is you want to learn. Get in touch on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube to find out more information. Bonus round. Every new student will get a free sample pack of their choice from my Exit Sounds sample label. So if this sounds good to you, and you want your tunes to sound less like, and more like, and get in touch to find out prices and book your first lesson now. See you soon.
Everybody jump up, come on!